Welcome, dear viewers, to today's series Visit. Thank you at this point for all the valuable letters, for all the valuable thoughts, tips, and case documentation, which of course are a wonderful basis to create a possibly interesting visit program again and again. The feedback gives me a lot of resonance and of course makes me very happy. As a doctor, you're like a bit like, at least I think it's a bit like a detective. And if you then progress in this way of thinking and try to put yourself into the position of these many really extremely interesting cases, then it's a lot of fun to give you a dose of advice without claiming that this is final. But it's also important in life, I think, to make progress with small things, and with every better knowledge, with every better understanding you get a little smarter, the view becomes broader. I've always felt like when I went from training to further training, that something was given to me that makes me more careful, that makes me more determined, and where I really had the feeling, not in true size, but in true perspective, to get bigger and above all, of course, to get deeper into this view of what is needed. Today Mrs. Karen W. wrote to me. She wrote to me that she has been following this channel for a long time and is very grateful with what empathy and love you treat the patient. Thank you. I think if you love what you do, then it has nothing to do with work at all. And it's nice when you feel that way. It's true, but I also think it's so nice that you're worried about a person who was entrusted to you as a schoolgirl. And today she has also grown into a young teacher, but was and still is a little problem child for you. And you ask me for my opinion. This young girl went to school at the time, and as a teacher you have always noticed that the home environment was not in balance. The little one was again and again in school psychological treatment, and again it was tried to work with her on this level. However, the disease tendency, I think you first became aware of what developed from this psychic picture now that you see the girl again, when she is already 20 years old. This young woman then replied to me and wrote that she comes from a family where the father already had neurodermatitis. Neurodermatitis is not a hereditary disease at all. But one must always know that every child that is born gets the information of all family generations. This means that information is passed on from one generation to the next. And father and daughter are always genetically close, just like mother and son. You can sometimes see that with siblings of the same sex, that one is more like the mother and the other more like the father. Otherwise, from the family history, it is only known that mom had a lot of asthma, heart problems, lipedema, an intestinal tumor. This means that there are many things in imbalance in terms of the disease. The mother then also had what is known as endometriosis. And she gives me that as background knowledge. The other thing is that she describes having neurodermatitis since birth. Bladder infections, even as a child. Then an occurring what is called hand-foot disease. These are skin diseases that are enteroviruses or a human 7.1 virus or Coxsackie virus A. So viral reactivations on the skin. At 14 years old she had pastoral tachycardia syndrome. You won't find very much if you Google this pastoral tachycardia syndrome. But you just have to know that the spine lets out nerves, which also supply the heart in the area of the thoracic spine, and that tension situations in the area of the muscles in the area of these thoracic spine segments also supply the heart and can thus trigger cardiac arrhythmias. So this is about an unbalanced psychic. Balance, but also here it is about stress, about pressure, about situations that the little girl or today the young woman has also experienced. But when she was 14, stress started in her own life as well. At the age of 15 she had glandular fever. It's caused by infectious mononucleosis, by Epstein-Barr viruses with severe headaches and nausea, lymph node swelling, fatigue. At 16, 17, then again and again very severe period pains. Or from 16, 17, I assume until now and then at the age of 17 an inflammation of the renal pelvis. And the kidneys actually stand for the big topic of the stress through fear. I don't want to expand on that now, but she writes, the renal pelvic inflammation included a 2-week hospital stay, high fever, 40 degrees Celsius, chills, and from 17 on signs of lipedema, like her mother already had before her. The general condition is not good at the moment. The appetite keeps waning. Every now and then I throw up when I eat something. She sleeps very restlessly, but she also has bad dreams, regularly wakes up around 3 a.m. You have to wake up because the time after 12 p.m. to 3 a.m. is liver time. So what does that mean? She has trouble breathing sometimes. This may not even be a problem of the lungs, but more of the vegetative spasm, tension. She writes that I always feel weak and tired and very uncomfortable in my body right now. I just have the goal. I have a desire to push myself to have more energy for everyday life. I want to find my inner peace again. And of course that starts with the fact that I can sleep regularly and well again, and my eating habits may also change in this regard. That means I experience a very high level of compliance here. And of course I experience just from the data or from the anamnesis that you tell me a lot of information, which you may now have to dose a little as part of my advice. Now you are grown up, now you're taking it all into your own hands. And we are all put into this world. We are all born and we have no control who mother and father are. We are very often born into a loving environment. We are carried on hands, as people, as children. But there are also many, many, many other things that we see through our eyes, that hurt us as children, that mute us as children, that also frighten us as children when we have parents who do not live in harmony with each other. There are unreported cases of many, many extremely dramatic events in families. So let's leave it at that. In any case, childhood was not a bed of roses, and that does something to us humans. I would ask you to look at the first slide now and show you this slide because it goes back a little bit into how human beings come into being. You know, two people meet, sperm and egg cell connect, and then a small hydatidiform mole develops from it. That develops in the context of its 3 germ layers to corresponding organ systems, and at the end, after 9 months, a finished human being is born. I think we humans will never understand how it goes without saying that in a chronological order everything is naturally provided by the prerequisite of a powerful mother, everything also fits and people are generally born healthy. But the ectoderm, the outer germ layer, that's a very interesting germ layer, because from that corresponding organ structures grow, namely the skin appendages, including the testicles, for example in men, but also the nails, the hair and the skin and the nerves. That means the connection between nerves and skin stays for life, always connected. This is something that is very important to me that you really understand, because these things were of course also in the burden for your mother and not automatically for you as well. Hardly anyone is born with neurodermatitis. But neurodermatitis is constant inflammation at a level of the skin which of course is constantly reawakened by, not just psychological things, but also due to allergies that developed early on. And now I can't see from this list if you had the chance to be breastfed by your mom, or if you were toxically burdened at an early stage over 9 months through your mom. Fact is that all baby food is actually made from cow's milk. That means this very early recourse to a cow's milk diet means confronting the body early with a foreign protein. So that cradle cap, atopic eczema, and later maybe asthma arises. Because it is treated too much with cortisone via the skin, it then goes to the mucous membranes inside. These are things that have an incredible amount to do with that the children are naturally allergic to a foreign protein. It's not in nature's plan that a child that is born almost sterile and only at birth gets the first vaccination, by absorbing the mother's vaginal mucus, and slowly, the microbiome in the intestine builds up during the first year of life, and through the mother's milk, through the colostrum, such a strong immunity is created. It's pretty unlikely that you were allowed to take this start, or on the other hand a toxic load was too high in your mother, as part of the pre-existing conditions, and in the context of many events in this regard perhaps simply was not in a position to weigh this up for you. I say that now completely without judging, just to understand these things too. The other thing is that today you say I have a major intolerance, sometimes I even have to vomit. You really have to put the situation of your intestines back on a healthy footing. There are laboratories in Germany such as the Biovis laboratory or Consignment. You can send a stool sample for a large bowel check there, and there you can see a lot. So for 10 questions you get 10 answers. What actually happened here? What is going on here? Because a skin problem always starts at this point. It's triggered by a lot of things, but without putting the gut here in the base or in the beginning, you will never achieve anything in the end. You should do that because now you have to search and know, how is my mucosal immunity? Are there any inflammations that you don't put into perspective at all? For example, we take the small blood count from the patient or the full one. We look for eosinophils. Is there a parasitic load or not? That's not always the hit. This is not always the parameter for a parasitic load. One can use energetic bioresonance testing or electroacupuncture according to volume 50 to rule this out. But otherwise it is important, as I said, to know the mucosal immunity, the silent inflammation of the intestinal mucosa. How do the liver and pancreas work? The stool is examined for digestive residues, and also the so-called alpha-antitrypsin, calprotectin, lead us there whether the mucosal permeability is open or not. These are incredibly important things. The other questions are, of course, that you write, I had infectious mononucleosis, this is Epstein-Barr disease. I don't think there is anyone who is not confronted with EBV. That's not a problem at all. Every virus has its own host cell. You know that herpes viruses are very skin dominant. EBV likes to live in the liver cell. EBV is a lymphotropic virus that filters the lymphatic tissue but is also neurotopic, the nerves. And here's the question to ask, is there always, when you're weaker and getting weaker, a so-called Epstein-Barr reactivation, or is there a persistent Epstein-Barr infection? Which of course is essentially shown by a symptom. And that's the tiredness. I'm exhausted, I have no strength. I cannot sleep well. And you should look for these things. The large group of microimmune therapists has this look at viral reactivation. We have special tests here, including laboratory tests, from which we can see very well, has an infection taken place once, is an infection still latently persistent, or is it always reactivating at the moment when your immune capacity is reduced? And don't underestimate the power of strong gut immunity. The mucous membranes have 80% of our immune capacity, and therefore both the gut and a reactivated Epstein-Barr strain must be excluded, and very gladly also other herpes viruses, because it is about the skin and we see their double or triple loads. Please don't underestimate either the indication that you should be checked for a KPU, a cryptopyroluria. This is a 24-hour urine test, also at the laboratories mentioned. And then see if you have an often very, very undetected metabolic disease, for example eliminate zinc and vitamin B6. This means that people are often not even aware of these deficits, but they find that they cannot adapt to life as well as others. And B6 is our most important nerve vitamin. Zinc is our most important element for immunity, for skin regeneration. The immune system cannot function optimally when you are zinc deficient. And if you now recognize this KPU from the 24-hour urine, then first of all, a very consistent substitution with a preparation must be done for this KPU, consisting of B6 and zinc and others. That's the Tissot company that manufactures special preparations, or Life Protect as well. Take 1 active vitamin B6 in the morning and always 1 in the evening. And then you can actually influence this KPU very nicely. And then you will increasingly notice how these things are changing. The other thing is, of course, please also look at the extent to which there are toxic loads. Toxic loads in the context: am I already burdened by heavy metals through mom? Of course you can also diagnose that. For that we have environmental doctors. But many doctors have also trained in this field and with so-called provocation tests, by supporting one's own detoxification, they can also analyze whether the body is perhaps contaminated with mercury, lead or aluminum or silver. That means it's really time to slowly release those toxins. There are a lot of things for that. You can do that yourself with zeolite, the puff rock, which of course not only binds heavy metals in the intestine, but also, for example, fungi, histamine, toxins from bacteria. And these things are incredibly valuable for continuing to relieve the body. Please also look at selenium. Selenium is one of the most important trace elements for the detoxification metabolism, for the thyroid gland. And I am sure that 150 micrograms is needed by almost everyone today, because we just have a huge need to improve our detoxification. And we all get into these selenium deficiencies because we no longer cover that, because selenium is taken up by the plant in the soil and the soils have become quite low in selenium. That's a lot of things. And behind everything, of course, in neurodermatitis, and I put it here, the book by Rudiger Dolker, Illness as a Symbol. I am child, I'm a baby, I'm a little girl. So my reaction to this is unconscious. I still don't have the perception for a conscious reaction. It all happens slowly as I grow up. But especially when such a mother-child conflict is taking place there, and I'll just take the example that you might cry a lot and nobody comes and you're scared, unconsciously as a small child. Then a huge defense against the milk can also arise. And this fire that is in these little guys or little girls is so immense, that actually, through this itching on your skin you indirectly sense this aggression, this flaming aggression. And then of course on the other side you feel an incredible discomfort through all that itching all over the skin. Sometimes that's a topic that continues, it continues with completely different conflicts. And now it really is time. And that's why I showed this slide at the beginning, the connection between nerves and skin, how they trigger each other and how they reactivate. Each other. It's so important that you start again today and tomorrow, in this skin, in this life, in this body, to feel really happy. Of course, this means that you have to find out voluntarily now. And there are many people who, for example, practice the soul coach and get to very deep unconscious questions through certain rituals and are able to dissolve these mental blockages. So, why is it always coming back? This skin that weighs so heavily on me too. And I need to realize I have to open it too. I also need to loosen the clamp that's around me. I have to be allowed to loosen it. And I have to accept it in its entirety. This is a part of me. And it belongs to me. I have to become more responsive. I have to step out. I have to scrape it open and be there and endure and stand by myself. And I can no longer become so permeable, but I need to be more in touch with my life. With people. I have to, but I don't want to use this expression too much. But daring to try life again also means, of course, that I need strength and energy to do so. One doesn't work if the other isn't also available to me. But I don't need to defend myself anymore. I don't need to withdraw anymore. I'm grown up now and I don't want to live inward anymore. I have to present myself to the outside. Your teacher wrote so beautifully, I have a feeling doctors aren't ready anymore to dig deeper with her. It's so difficult with her and she would be so grateful for any advice. But I think in this situation as you are now, and you are facing the threshold of your life, even if 20 years have passed, but if you now know who you are, if you now know what you want, if you still have the strength to change direction and take a step back, which also reveals many things again, looks at them, lets them come to a surface, which brings you consciously back to life and tears apart an areas that you fought off before, now allows, processes, accepts it. I believe, then all this can make you a person tomorrow, who is a wonderful teacher, who comes to rest again, whose liver can regenerate, who recognizes an immune deficiency, works on it, who again with great joy eats food, processes food. When I throw up, it always means that my body is simply weak in its digestive enzymatic system. And all those things, I think, will help you a lot. We must never forget, it's not about 7 billion people, it's 7 billion times about one person. And we are all made of different cloth. That means each of us needs more or less warmth and love, more or less good or less bad food. We all have different ways to compensate things. And what is good for one person may not be good for another at all. And yet all this is really not an impossible task. And now really look for people who understand this, who accompany you exactly from the point. And I think that will be a good way, and one person will wholeheartedly, I think, very pleased. And this is your former teacher. And on that note, I would like to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for this case presentation, and I hope that I was able to give you some valuable information. With this in mind, whenever you have questions, please send them to Visite at QS24.tv and have a wonderful week that now lies ahead of us all. It's spring. Let's take each breath twice as intensely and observe. There is only one spring 2022, and I wish that you experience it with as much joy as I do. In this spirit, enjoy and see you next time. Goodbye.